Growing up, I was a Nintendo kid. I remember vaguely my parents buying the original NES. I remember never beating Super Mario Bros. Because games were hard and only ever playing Mario 3 when my babysitter would bring her copy over in the summer. Besides a short stint with the Game Gear before it decided to harikari itself with the palm of my hand, the NES was basically all I had until the N64 came out and I demanded an upgrade, which I finally got like 2 years later. Sure, the PlayStation was out and Sega was still around, but being born and raised on Nintendo, I of course went with the N64 and its family-friendly content. Hey, where's the blood? Look, it was more powerful. It had Mario and Zelda and Star Wars, and those 3D graphics were so sweet. Absolutely no regrets about that childhood decision, because the N64 led to the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, and eventually the GameCube before I ever put my hard-earned allowance and trade-in credit down on a competitor's console, the PlayStation 2. Hey, the GameCube didn't have SmackDown or Budokai, at least not initially, and I was getting pile-driven and spirit bombed to King Yama's realm every day after school by my friends who had PS2s. What was I to do? And yes, I wanted to pop some caps and some pixelated prostitutes, okay? There, you happy? I admit it. My name's Justin, and I was a teenage boy. But despite my evolving, hormonally driven taste, I grew up loving Nintendo and their amazing franchises, each of which honestly have had system-selling quality games throughout Nintendo's history. And even though I'm older now and enjoy a vast array of different games and platforms, there's always something about Nintendo that keeps catching my eye and pulling me back in. But lately, that warm, fuzzy feeling Nintendo used to give off feels more like a leech trying to latch on and suck every ounce of income out of you. Now, I know what I'm about to do is dangerous. Criticizing Nintendo is risky, not only because so many people love Nintendo like it's their child, like it can do no wrong, and how dare you say my perfect angel has punched you right in the stomach and stolen your lunch money, but also because Nintendo is a spiteful little big company. Of course, to be fair, the opposite is true as well. You say anything nice about Nintendo, hey, games are looking pretty good these days, and you're automatically a fanboy, a shill, a Nintendroid, a sheep, all the wonderful and derogatory names the witty internet can come up with. Nintendo always seems to be riding this wave of favorability, and it does feel like the tide has once again shifted to a mostly negative tone for poor Nintendo. You know, the 3DS came out and everyone dumped on them for the price and the gimmick. Then the Wii U came out and compounded that dumping. Then the 3DS turned out to be amazing even without the gimmick, and then everyone just felt so bad for Nintendo because no one liked the Wii U enough to buy one, even though it was not the worst thing they'd ever created. And then instead of disappointing us all and just fading away like their cousins, the Switch was amazing and everyone pretty much agreed with that, and the wave of excitement was so high and everyone just loved so much about what Nintendo was doing, and we heaped praises on them, and bam, instead of being on the brink of bankruptcy, they're back with a bang. Or, well, a clang. And by back, I mean back to being a corporation in control, one with power, which can be dangerous, especially for our wallets. Maybe it's our fault. Maybe we all just got used to the fact that Nintendo is supposed to be the budget option, the value proposition. They've always been the one to undercut their competition on prices. They had to sacrifice performance to do it, but they made up for it with great gameplay, a bit of gimmickry, and timeless graphics that age as well as a Big Mac on a countertop. But with the Switch 2, it feels like there's been a shift overall. Like they've crossed this line in the sand, this Rubicon that Nintendo's not only trampled over, but kicked mud in our eyes as they did so. It's sort of how I felt when Sony announced the PlayStation 3 at
$499 US,
while the PS2 was running around at 200. But also worse because Nintendo's now raised the price of a system that's 8 years old and never had a price drop. Like, are you kidding me, Nintendo? Like, if you want to get into Nintendo right now, you're paying full price for even last gen stuff, which is just crazy. And they basically abandoned the pure handheld market. The Switch Lite is their cheapest system, and its cost was also raised to $230. If I was a parent looking to buy my kid a gaming console, I'm wondering why I would buy them a $230 handheld that's already 8 years old. It used to be that we had cheaper handhelds to draw people in and that older consoles got price cuts. I only bought an Xbox One S and a PS4 Slim because they were price cut to $200. I would have never bought them at their introductory price, and certainly not if they went up in price. But to their credit, they did resist the shift to $70 games for a long time. They sort of had to. I mean, you can't really compare a PS5 game to a Switch 1 game, but now they've done a hop, skip, and a jump right past that barrier with $80 games and have decided to embrace the dark side of DLC. I'm old enough to remember when games started having DLC. I guess expansion packs sort of count as DLC as well, but I remember Halo 2 getting extra maps, which was amazing and gave me and my college buddies some new places to try and explore and exploit. And I mean, who doesn't love a little extra content release for a game we love? But we like it when that's a long time after we've finished the game. It's a nice little dessert, an after dinner drink to reinforce what you loved about the experience. Maybe add a little bit of new content and mechanics and get you excited for the next entry. We want to feel like this is a passion project the developers had to give us more of what we loved and what they loved. Not something they've intentionally withheld just to leech more money out of your wallet. It's just such a bad look. I mean, if you've done work on a game before it's even launched, such that it's available at launch, that work should be included in the game, not as an extra download that you then have to pay for. I mean, again, Nintendo, are you kidding me? What's next? Paying $70 for the tutorial and then having to pay another $30 for the actual story? Okay, let's not give them any ideas here. Their tutorials are long enough these days that they'd probably think that's good value. I mean, they couldn't even bother to pack in a tutorial on the system and instead decided it was a good idea to charge $10 for it. It was not a good idea. And I really don't understand what's going on with their game prices in general these days. Something like Zelda Skyward Sword HD releases for $60 and then Metroid Prime Remaster releases at $40. Like, what? How does that make any sense? Now we get 2 Mario Wii games for $60 when we once got 3 Mario games for $60, and then Tears is the first $70 game, and now we're at $80 for Switch 2 versions and select Nintendo titles that they deem are special. It's a far cry from the Nintendo Selects era when Nintendo would release some of their best sellers at low prices, and I really miss those times. It kind of leaves you with a sick feeling in your stomach as you realize the company you grew up loving and whose games you adore is now in a position of strength where they can nickel and dime you to death. Of course, that's if they're not suing you into a mountain of debt. I'd say a death mountain of debt, but I'm sure that's trademarked, so I should have probably bleeped that. Nintendo's always been an aggressive company when it comes to protecting their IPs and going after emulation and their ROMs proliferating the internet. Newsflash, it's not working. And if you can't tell from my previous videos, I don't really have a problem with emulation. I understand why they do and fully acknowledge it's their right to fight back against it however they wish. And while I won't say that doing that in itself is anti-consumer, it's really not, sorry guys. It is anti-consumer to go out and patent every little thing about a game or a system to prevent people from taking inspiration and creating something new. I mean, come on, Nintendo. It's not like you've never taken inspiration for something else before, is it? Maybe Alexei Pajitnov should patent the idea of rotating pieces to eliminate lines and then sue you for all that sweet Dr. Mario money. I mean, doctors do make more than plumbers, right? Their image protection is also just so inconsistent. They let people put some game footage on YouTube and then copyright strike others when they don't like what you say or do. And get videos of mods taken down when it's really just people loving the games and playing them and breaking them for fun, which fun is what all of this is about. Like, seriously, these people are giving you free publicity for your games and you strike these videos. Having them taken down and going after people seemingly randomly doesn't endear anyone toward your company. It only makes them resent you. I think there's something to be said about companies that embrace these fan creations. I mean, let's be honest, sometimes these fan creations improve on Nintendo's product. They could do it if they wanted, there's money to be made, but no, they'd rather sell you an unaltered copy of Mario 64 for like the 5th time, but only if you act now before it goes back into the vault. Modding's been a PC staple for decades. It's just unfortunate console manufacturers, especially Nintendo, refuse to embrace their potential. It's not just how they treat the gaming community, but also how they treat their customers. They've always had these little limitations when it comes to their games. Sure, they've embraced backwards compatibility better than most, but at the same time, they've so limited the systems in other ways. Like virtual console games tied to systems and being difficult to transfer. They're so worried that someone who didn't pay them for a game might play that game somehow on a system they did pay for, that they restrict what systems you can play games you bought. I had a Wii stolen, and because of these limitations, there's no way for me to transfer those purchases to anything else. So no, I don't feel bad when I download these games for free on a Wii U. Like seriously, they do know you can play Super Mario on a calculator, right? They don't need to be this restrictive. All their efforts have now led to these virtual cartridges, which at first I was sort of like, oh, that's interesting. But then when I actually had to deal with it, I was like, what the hell is this? I have 3 Switches that work. My original LCD model, an OLED that I repaired, and the Switch 2. Somehow, one of my games was loaded on the LCD Switch I hadn't played in like months or years. And I could not play that game on the Switch 2 because the LCD needed to charge and power on and connect to the internet for some reason and tell Nintendo, yes, I do still exist, and yes, this game is somehow tied to this system, and no, you can't play it until you update and eject the game and go through a whole bunch of pointless and unnecessary hoops to play something that literally a day before I could play without any of this. It doesn't have to be this complicated, Nintendo. Look, you don't need me to tell you this, and you're not gonna ever hear this anyway, but you don't need to worry about people buying your games. We've been able to emulate NES and SNES games for literally decades, and yet your mini consoles sold out faster than when Activision discovered loot boxes. And they didn't even have every good game on them. People love your games. They may not love every console you put out, but they love your games, and they will very clearly pay to play them. I mean, people still bought that glitch fest, much maligned Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to the tune of 27 million copies. The second best-selling generation. My God, it's no wonder they don't put more effort into it. If I could sit here and ramble for 10 minutes and get 5 million views, I don't think I would put effort in either. I mean, there's a reason these games stay at their launch price way longer than anything Ubisoft puts out. Nintendo knows how to make a great game. Just look at Metroid Prime 4. The game was announced in 2017 and had such issues that Nintendo actually had a new studio take over. That's pretty much unheard of in the gaming world. Most games caught in development hell like that will be canceled, or released in a shit state and then canceled. Maybe it's because I was a Nintendo child, but when I started getting that itch to play games after a long time of not really picking up a controller, it was Nintendo I looked to first. Mostly because of Pokemon, but with a 3DS, I could catch up on so many franchises and actually play games I'd missed as a kid, like A Link to the Past. I know this video is pretty critical of Nintendo, but at my core, I am a Nintendo fan. And oddly enough, I want Nintendo to continue succeeding, even though that likely means they continue some of the practices that I don't like. But I want them to succeed because I want the next generation to experience the wonders of Nintendo like I did. I want them to pick up a Nintendo console and be blown away by the games and the characters and the stories that Nintendo is really good at telling, because the alternative is that these franchises die or some other corporation gobbles up an underperforming Nintendo and, like so many have done before, decide their return on investment is far more important than our entertainment. That is by far a worse alternative to the current situation. Now, I'm not saying they need to pull a 3DS and cut the price of the Switch 2 based on sales. I don't see a reason to do that at all. But what I am saying is I want them to do better to respect the fans who've put them in this position. We all know what happens when you disrespect and disappoint the fans. They eventually pull back. They drift somewhere else. And if they're not careful, they could find themselves right back where they were in 2015, right where Xbox finds itself now, a gaming company struggling to recapture their fan base. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation for a company as big and powerful as Nintendo, and one that is as beloved as Nintendo. And if they don't, well, then maybe that onus is really on us, the consumers, the gamers, to put our money where our mouth is, to stop paying for what we see as overpriced consoles or games. Personally, I think they could garner a lot of goodwill and fan equity if they brought back something like Nintendo Selects. I mean, come on, it wasn't that long ago you could buy 3DS and Wii U games for cheap. A game like Breath of the Wild or Odyssey shouldn't still be $60, especially digitally. And Pikmin 3 shouldn't be $60 on Switch while it once sold for $30 on the Wii U. Like everyone, I of course wish everything was cheaper, but I know that's not realistic. But as someone who built their backlog by buying year-plus old games at deep discounts, I can only hope we see some decent sales before they go out of print forever. And if 450 is too much for the latest and greatest from Nintendo, there's always their older consoles that have an amazing back catalog of games just waiting to be played or played again. The consoles are relatively cheap, relatively easy to mod, and relatively easy to find games for, either on a marketplace like eBay or the wild, wild web. At this point, it's really okay, man. If you know, you know. I mean, we don't need to buy every new release. God knows I don't. And if you're anything like me, you have one heck of a backlog just waiting for you to dive into. And if Nintendo hardware doesn't interest you, the world is overflowing with amazing handheld emulators that do as good of a job, if not better job, of playing these games and so many more. It's an option Nintendo hates, but there's a market for it because there's a void that Nintendo could fill if they wanted. I still have my eyes on that Iron Thor for 3DS emulation, but for $200, you can get a device that can play so many Nintendo games. You'll find yourself under a mountain of digital games so big that by the time you mash your way out of it, the Switch 3 will likely be out, and if trends reverse, the Switch 2 might only be $400 by then. And if you're exhausted or just straight up mad about Nintendo's practices, there are other ecosystems out there. I just picked up this PS Vita, and even with only having it a short amount of time, it's an amazing little device I just can't wait to dive into. I'll probably do a video on how awesome this modded Vita is, so if you're interested in that, consider subscribing to the channel. And while Sony, the corporation, might not be much better than Nintendo, the corporation, at least their marketplace is still open for business.